Hi everyone, it's me. Welcome to today's video. We are doing our December wrap up today. So we are wrapping up our final reads that we got through in 2025. And I'm a little surprised, honestly, at how many books we have to wrap up in this month. I honestly didn't think I would be able to read that many books in December because of our very ambitious Bookmas video schedule. So the fact that December was actually my biggest reading month in 2025 is very surprising. And not only was it like my biggest reading month in terms of amount of books read, but I also read some like chunkers in there as well. Like I fit in a Brandon Sanderson. So anyways, 16 books to get through today, which means, I don't know, buckle in, lock in, grab a snack, grab a drink, get comfortable, because we're going to be talking for a while today. So for genre breakdown, out of the 16 books I read, 8 of them were fantasies. We had 3 romances, 1 mystery, 3 fictions, and 1 classic. And as for the December TBR, I did read 5 out of 5, so yay, go us, did it again. Great way to finish the year, to finish the monthly TBR. And let's just get straight into this stack of books, this gigantic stack of books. So I usually know I organize my monthly wrap-ups based on genre, and we are going to do kind of the same thing today, but just first of all, I want to go over the 6 books that we read for Bookmas vlogs, just grouped at the start, because I do want to like whiz through these ones a little bit quickly. For each of these first 6 books, I do have an entire dedicated reading vlog, so I feel like we've already covered these books enough. We literally have dedicated videos for these first 6 books. So in the interest of time, we're going to go over these first 6 books just super quick. And if you want to hear more, definitely check out those Bookmas reading vlogs where I unwrapped like a wrapped book to read a book a day. There are basically 6 Bookmas reading vlogs where I read these 6 books. The first Bookmas read was The Wishing Game by Meg Shaffer. This is a cozy fantasy. We follow Lucy, who is a teacher's assistant to a kindergarten class, and she is specifically very close to this one student. Kind of like a Matilda, Miss Honey student-teacher connection, where she truly cares for him, and she's sort of also trying to pursue these steps of potentially adopting him. Growing up, she never had the best childhood, so her main goal in life really is to help offer kids a rich childhood. Reading has always been one of her favorite hobbies, and as a kid she was a really big fan of these certain children's books by a certain author that hasn't been seen or heard of in a really long time, and has secluded himself on this island where all of his children's books are set. So Lucy now is reading these books to Christopher, which is the kid that she's really close to, when one day this reclusive author announces that he's hosting a contest where 4 contestants will be able to go to his island and play in this game for a chance to win the only copy of his next book. And so Lucy enters, we get into the story of like puzzles, whimsical island, and it really feels like a children's tale but written for adults. This book felt nostalgic in the best way. If you loved reading books as a kid, I think you'd be guaranteed to love this, because it really does feel like a children's book, but we are following adult characters who are struggling with adult things like career, money, wanting to have a family but not having the means for it. There were also a few very relevant cultural issues addressed in this, like using AI to write books or create art. There was some commentary on that in this book, and I really enjoyed it. It was a story where we follow characters facing their fears, overcoming barriers that they like built up throughout their childhood. Really enjoyed this one. That was The Wishing Game. My second Bookmas read was The Everlasting by Alix E. Harrow. I had really high hopes for this one. Unfortunately, it didn't live up, which I think is an unpopular opinion out there. But this one is a fantasy where we follow the like legend of this lady knight. Our protagonist is a historian who has always had this fascination with this lady knight, Sir Una, and during this time of war, he is actually tasked with literally stepping into history and making sure Sir Una in history fulfills her actual destiny. So we get into the story of time travel, of rewriting history, but we get into this dilemma where our historian actually ends up falling in love with Sir Una and doesn't want to go through with his task, because his task is basically making sure that she falls to her death and become this like martyr figure, and he doesn't want that because he actually loves her, so he doesn't want her to die. There definitely were parts of this book that I loved. The writing was absolutely stunning. Also very interesting writing style where we are in a second person POV and we switch POVs. So at some parts of the book we are in the historian's POV but addressing Sir Una as you, and then at other parts we flip that, so we are in the POV of Sir Una and we are addressing the historian as you. So I found that to be an interesting way of telling telling the story, and I actually enjoyed that part of it. But there was just something about this story that honestly made me bored as I continued on through it. The romance between the knight and Sir Una to me didn't resonate. For me, it felt like the knight just had this literal fascination, this idolization of Sir Una, and I didn't really see any personal connection between them. It really seemed to be a romance based on just him liking the image of her or the idea of her. So for me, the love story just felt like a plot device. I also feel like this book suffered the Our Infinite Fates effect, that's what I'm calling it, where in the story, we basically iterate the same thing over and over and over and over again. So in this book, we are iterating the same historical events over again, but trying to make little changes every time throughout. And I just found there to be too many iterations. I would have preferred fewer iterations, but more time spent in each one, like give us development within each iteration versus just like iterating over and over and over and over and over again. Like by the third or fourth iteration, I just felt tired of it. And that's how I felt with Our Infinite Fates too. With the constant reincarnations in that story, I felt the same way with this one, with the like jumping back in time. So unfortunately, I didn't love this one. It was beautifully written, but I just felt really bored at the story. However, I did, after reading this one, because I was getting this recommended from a lot of you guys, so thank you, I did read The 6 Deaths of the Saint, also by Alix E. Harrow. It is a 30-page short story that inspired this novel, so this is basically a longer version, a longer telling of the story of The 6 Deaths of the Saint. And I will say this story in general worked so much better over a span of just 30 pages. Like it was a beautiful short story. I didn't get that exhausted feeling from iterating over and over and over and over again because I don't know, it was just everything happened so quick. It was more telling the idea of the story versus like the nitty-gritty details of it. And the short story version was just, it was just so short and to the point, but it also made me somehow connect to the characters way more than all the pages in this book did. So I would recommend reading 6 Deaths of the Saint. It's literally 30 pages. It feels like a fairy tale when you're reading it, and it's just a really beautifully written 30 pages. What can I say? But I think if you did love 6 Deaths of the Saint and then read The Everlasting after reading that short story, maybe this would have resonated more just because you have that like backstory with that short story. But for me, yeah, I don't know. It was all right. I still will continue to read Alix E. Harrow because, as I mentioned, I do really love her writing. I think she writes beautifully. Like her writing is gorgeous, but this long version of the book didn't work for me. The third book I read for Bookmas was Broken Country by Clare Leslie Hall. We are set like around the 1960s in the English countryside, and this is a historical fiction that reads like a mystery but also has a love story in there as well. We follow Beth, who lives on a farm with her gentle husband Frank, and they live a very peaceful, lovely married life. They do have some things buried in the past though. They did lose their son a little while ago. They don't really bring it up anymore, but that's definitely something that sort of put a stain on their marriage, but they're just kind of like, you know, they're hiding it. They're putting it in the past. One day, a dog runs onto their land and starts attacking their sheep, and so very sadly, they have to shoot the dog. That dog happens to be owned by Beth's ex, the one that got away, her first love, who did move away, but apparently he's now back. He has moved back with his current son, who actually reminds Beth of her late son. So as Beth and this previous love of her life see each other, reconnect over certain things, all these traumatic things from the past start coming up, and we jump from timeline to timeline in this one where we are in the past, and then we're sort of like in the nearer past, and then we are literally on trial. There is an active court case going on for a murder, and as we get little bits and pieces, the whole picture starts coming together. The writing in this book is so ominous, so much like kind of not creepy, but just foreboding imagery that is plunked throughout this entire story. I think the writing is really strong in this book. There are some heavy themes with religion and growing up in different circumstances, financially, religiously, politically, and all that, and seeing how that plays into your life as you grow up. And I found the court case stuff interesting in this book as well. We definitely had some commentary on how court cases can be made so sensational and how politics and religion and previous biases can always come into a court case, and claims can be made with zero evidence or like zero foundation because of previous bias. So I think this book was really well done. The first half was just okay for me. Writing was really strong, but I found it didn't really like do anything new for me in terms of plot and things we were learning, like messages. I feel like every time I read a historical fiction or a general fiction or a literary fiction, I always expect to like gain another insight into the human experience. And I feel like the first half was just very normal to me, very expected. But the second half of this book was, you know, that was the strong half. It's where everything came together. It's where I was like, oh yeah, this is really impacting me. The characters are not perfect. You will feel very frustrated with them. They will make decisions that you don't agree with and that aggravate you. But I think because of the direction this book came in, it didn't bother me, because that was kind of the whole point of the story, is seeing how these certain decisions can affect your life. So that was Broken Country. Really enjoyed it. And I love how I said I was going to go through these first 6 books really quickly and completely lied about that, because let's be honest, when have I ever wrapped up a book quickly in a monthly wrap up? Never. I'm literally unable. But anyways, the 4th Bookmas book was Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Maehrer. This is a comedic romantasy, which is just so funny. I wouldn't even say, like, it's not even a cozy romantasy, it is just a funny romantasy. And we just lost her. But this book, I think, can be really hit and miss depending on what mood you're in, depending on what you're expecting. And I could definitely see how this book could be divisive, but I think it just hit me at the perfect time. I did read this after, was it after Broken Country or after The Everlasting? It was after one of those. So I think I was just in the mood for something light and funny and something to not take so seriously. And so this one just hit me at the perfect time. I kind of read this one like Mate by Ali Hazelwood, or not Mate, Bride, or both of them, I guess. Not in the sense that they are spicy paranormal romances whatsoever. There's no spice in this book. There's actually like probably one of the slowest burns that I've seen in a long time in this book. But yeah, not a spicy book whatsoever. But what I found similar between this and Bride was that they're basically parodies of a romantasy. Like, they're really self-aware. They make fun of themselves. They really just exaggerate every single trope and characteristic of the romantasy genre. And I just find that so funny. I don't know. I love it. I love poking fun at genres, and I think the romantasy genre in general, just, it's so easy to poke fun at it. But for a quick plot synopsis, in this one we follow Evie. She has lost her job, so she's currently looking for a job. She's kind of lost, and she wanders into a forest near her village, where she runs into the villain. The villain takes her back to his house, his headquarters, and is basically like, you need to work for me now because you know where I live, you know my identity, and I can't let you go. And so he offers her a job, she accepts it, and we go in the story where she becomes his assistant and also just develops this gigantic crush on him. I just had a really fun time reading this. I think every single character in this book feels like a caricature. Like, Evie as our protagonist is literally that very typical, not useless, but like very typical main character in an action scene where they just like fall all the time. Like, I used to always make fun of this. I feel like it's very common for a main character to just be very clumsy and to trip over things and to fall over things, because that's how you make high stakes situations feel even more high stakes, is if our main character falls and gets stuck or something like that. And the amount of times that Evie just like fell I found was just hilarious. Our villain is also just like that very typical brooding but misunderstood and overly protective like main male character. And our like dark villain headquarters also felt very corporate. It was like a full evil corporation with an HR department and everything. I don't know, it was just so silly. There was also an interesting story going on. There is like somewhat of a high stakes plot. So I found this was a good balance of humor and poking fun, but also wasn't just a complete fluff book. Like, there was some substance to it. And I also honestly really enjoyed the romance in this. I really like Evie and the villain together. I think their chemistry is like really funny, but also like I can see it. Like, I totally get it. And as I mentioned, an actual slow burn, which I really appreciate and respect these days. I think what was missing mainly for me was just I didn't really understand why the villain was so intent on being a villain for the majority of the book. We did get that explained closer to the end, but I feel like I would have preferred a little more explanation, like slowly throughout the book, learning things slowly about him versus just having it all at the end, because I didn't really understand his intentions. So for a lot of the plot, I was like, I don't know why we're doing this. But yeah, I would say if you're looking for a lighter read in between heavier fantasies, but you still want to scratch that fantasy itch or that romantasy itch, I would recommend this one. I will be continuing the series. This was just hilarious to me. My fifth book misread was House of the Beast by Michelle Wong. Oh, this one had so much promise. I was so excited to read this, but unfortunately unfortunately it didn't completely live up to my expectations. I think it was such an interesting format of a story, and I think the idea was very good, but the execution lost me a little bit. So this one is a gothic horror fantasy. Reads like a dark fairy tale. There is a little bit of gore in there, but we follow Alma in this one. Her mother is sick and her father's never been in the picture, but one day she finds this clue as to who her father might be, or she finds this little message from her father. She tracks him down and he happens to be this like really rich, really significant nobleman. So she starts connecting with her father and asks if he can do anything to help cure her mother. Her father decides to take them in because there is something to do with their family about like worshipping this beast, this very beastly god. And her dad basically realizes like, oh, we can use Alma and have her pledged to this god as well and join our family and give us strength. And so Alma starts getting tied into all this aristocracy, joins her father because he promises that he will do anything he can to save her sick mother. And then we go from there, we get tied into these like trials or competitions and stuff like that. I was just a little bit confused as to what this book wanted to be, what genre it wanted to be, because it started as this really dark fairy tale gothic horror story. I honestly loved the prologue. I loved like the first 3 chapters of this book, but then our story turned into like a trials fantasy. And then as we got into the trials, we sort of lost our voice, I think, in the writing style. The beginning was written in just like such juicy writing. Like the best way I can describe it is that the writing was so juicy at the start, so just like delicious. And then as we got further into the plot, I feel like the juice of the writing just disappeared. It leaked, it spilled, I don't know where it went. And I just wanted that like delicious darkness back. The time period in this one also confused me. It felt like we were in a period piece, like a historical gothic setting, just due to like the things our characters were wearing, the weapons they were using. It felt very back in the day. But then there was this really quick mention of televisions, and then we didn't really like expand on that. It was like one sentence, like we mentioned televisions, and I was like, televisions exist in this world, and then we didn't really expand on that or go deeper into that, so that really took me out of it. And I honestly think like we didn't get that much character development in this one. If I look at Alma from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, she seemed like a very similar character, just like aged a little more. I would have loved to see her like change and form as a character. I also would have loved to see her relationship with her father develop a little bit more over the years, but we didn't get that. I honestly, like at the end of reading this book, felt like this story should have been told in a duology. Like that entire dark fairy tale part at the beginning, like the prologue, should have been an entire book in its own, where we saw Alma grew up, where we saw her develop this tension, this really bad relationship with her father. We should have seen more of that, I think, and that should have been the first book. And then in the second book, we could have jumped more into like adventure fantasy trials, whatever, but it felt like this book was trying to do a little bit too much in one. Very cool format of book though, because if you didn't watch my Bookmas vlog, or if you haven't heard of this, Michelle Wong, the author, is actually an illustrator. She illustrated the Legends of Korra graphic novel, and so she took her illustration skills into this one. Hold on, I'm trying to find an example, but like we do have like little illustrations sort of littered throughout the entire text that I think like really enriched the reading experience. Let me try and find another one. Oh yeah, this one is a good one. Like I just loved getting these little pictures of the scenes and things that were happening. I love the format of it, but it just overall did not work for me. And then the 6th and final Bookmas book was Welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop by Hwang Bo-Reum. Oh my goodness, this book literally healed me. I had the best day reading this book. It was our final Bookmas vlog, and like what a way to end Bookmas with this cozy read about book lovers, about a bookshop. In this one, our protagonist is really burnt out at the start of the book. She has left her job, she's left her stressful life behind, and she has decided to open a bookshop in this very small, quaint town in Korea. And we go along with her as she starts learning like what actually makes a good bookshop, what makes a good book rec, what is the atmosphere we want to set in our bookshop, like how do we make this bookshop welcoming for people to come in, spend the day, hang out. We get into book club stuff, and we also discuss work-life balance a lot and the act of getting burnt out and how to prevent that, and also just how to balance your life with like needing to work to provide for yourself and for your family, but also not letting it take over your life, and like what's the difference between passion and work and happiness and fulfillment and all of that. And I just love this book so much. As someone who has had the roughest year with like mass layoffs, with companies going bankrupt, with just toxic work environments, this book truly spoke to my soul. I loved it so much. It's not a very plot heavy story at all. There's maybe an idea of a plot in this book, but it was just like exploring all of these different things and like making you feel good about yourself and just like showing you you're not alone in a lot of these feelings. I loved this one so much. Truly healed my soul. If you have ever felt like burnt out or felt that you worked in a toxic environment or just like wanted to live a slower life, read this. So good. Okay, we're done going through book misreads, so these are the remaining books that I read off camera throughout the month of December. We'll start with our fantasies. So I did read Just Fallen Stars by Imani Erriu. This is the second book to Heavenly Bodies. It's a romantasy series. I thought it was going to be a duology for whatever reason, but it's actually a trilogy. So this is the second book. We are set in a celestial-based world with a very celestial-based magic system, which is very fun. It's basically like elemental magic, but just connected to the stars. And our protagonist is Alara, who is an exiled princess. In the first book, she is forced to flee because there's an attack on her kingdom, but she ends up actually being captured by another enemy kingdom while she's on the run. They, however, form an agreement with her. They'll help her continue to train her magic, which is currently blocked, but in return, she has to help them kill a star. And in this world, a star is basically a god. But she doesn't really have a choice. She has to agree, and so she starts training with the crown prince. The first book, Heavenly Bodies, was so fast-paced. It was really fun. I definitely enjoyed it, but I think my craving after Heavenly Bodies was I wanted to slow down a little bit. It was honestly a little bit too fast, a touch too fast, where I wanted to take some time to settle into certain pockets of the plot and take, breathe a little bit, breathe into these moments that like sometimes it's nice to slow down in a moment and feel the feels. But we didn't get that in Fallen Stars. In fact, I feel like this one was even more fast-paced than Heavenly Bodies, and I just felt like I was getting whiplash while reading this book. Like, we were going from place to place, things were happening all over, there were twists and turns, and like, yes, that sounds like a lot of fun, but I think it was just too much for me. Like, it felt like we were doing things just to do things, and I just need more meaning behind the things we were doing. So there were definitely a lot of fun elements in this one. First of all, we have like this pirate seafaring journey element in this book, and I love a pirate seafaring journey. I think that is just so fun to read. I love exploring different parts of a fantasy world, and I feel like one of the best ways, one of the most fun ways to do that is on a boat. And so I really enjoyed that part of the story. We also get like mind and like dream walking exploration, which I also find to be very fun. I love reading about that. And this book leans very heavily on prophecy and fate, which I also think is just fun in a fantasy. I don't know, it's just a fun element. But there were some things I didn't like. First of all, the magic system felt very soft. It felt like we had a few rules, but also they didn't really make sense, or sometimes we didn't even follow our own rules. Magic is just like magic in this world. And like, I think after reading a lot of Brandon Sanderson lately and having like knowing that, like we can set such rigid magic systems that have so many rules that make sense and you have to obey the laws of the world. I think just reading something like this where magic is just like magic, like, sparkles, magic, it's, everything can be explained away because it's magic. It's just like softer magic systems like this are just becoming more apparent to me because of some of the harder magic systems that I've been reading recently. I do also think that there were a lot of shock value twists in this one that honestly didn't make sense to me and really aggravated me. You guys know I do not love a plot twist that has like nothing to back it up. I need plot twists with substance. And I also didn't like the chemistry between our two main characters in this book, which is so strange because I actually did like their romance in the first book, but I feel like in this one, their entire romance just became a fated mates thing. Like, oh, you're my soulmate, so I love you. And that's it. Like, there was nothing else in their relationship together through this entire book. It was just like, I will do anything for you because you're my soulmate, but we didn't have like actual substance to back that up in this one. And honestly, a lot of the other romance plots between like the secondary characters were a lot better for me than our main romance in this one. So yeah, I don't know, this one just felt like very CW show for me, which is like, it's something very fun to watch, but for me, not very fun to read. So this one confused me a little bit because I did enjoy Heavenly Bodies, but this one was just like a little bit too much. I think I still will continue to read the third book. I do still have hope that we can wrap it up all together by the end because there are some interesting things happening in the plot, but this one was just a little bit like, whoop, a little bit too much for me. I also just think this book reads very YA, but with spice, and that's why it's categorized as new adult or adult. I think it's new adult, but it just feels like a YA story with spice, which is fine. Like, I love reading YA fantasy, but for this to be categorized as an adult novel or even a new adult novel, I just expect the plot to be less YA. So that was Fallen Stars. Our next book takes a very different tone. So I finally read The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. Maclean. I know this one's been sitting on my TBR for the longest time, and I was like, I need to read it during these cold months, because if I don't read this book during these cold months, I will have to wait until like the next cold months, like for the next cold season to come around, although I know we are still in the middle of cold season. We have like another 4 or 5 months of winter left, if we're gonna be completely honest. I live in Canada, okay? But I really wanted to read this one like close to the fall because like, look at it. It looks like a fall book. I actually don't think the insides of the book are that fall. In fact, I think it's like kind of summery because we're set at a zoo, and I feel like I also relate zoos to like summer outings. But I wanted to read this one in the fall, okay? It seemed like a fall read, like a cozy fantasy. I feel like that screams fall. Anyways, this is a cozy sapphic fantasy. We follow Ayla, who is like a phoenix specialized zookeeper at this magical zoo. So she oversees magical birds, but her absolute favorite that she oversees is this very specific type of a phoenix. And she's been trying to save this species because they are becoming endangered. There is this like conservation breeding program that is going around, and she wants to be a part of it. She wants to help the efforts, but things are not looking great when a phoenix at a neighboring zoo gets stolen. Ayla ends up having to work with a rival zookeeper to try and basically like save the phoenix species, and that's our story. We're just trying to save the phoenixes. This was so cozy, so descriptive. We learned so much about like various subspecies of like phoenixes, griffins, just all kinds of magical creatures. We learned so many just like random facts about these made up creatures, and I found that to be fun to read overall. I think like as we were moving through the book, I was like, wow, look at all these fun facts about these made up species. But I think it might have been a little bit overdone in the amount of information we got, because as we kept getting more and more and more, I started realizing like, this is a standalone book. Like, why are we like doing so much world building, so to speak, like learning so much about like these random species of animals for a standalone book? Like, it's not like we're trying to build this complex world where we're going to spend a lot of time in it. Like, I think at one point I was like, okay, maybe this is a little bit overdone on like the amount of like phoenix facts or griffin facts or like other animal facts that we were learning. So I think at one point I lost the immersion at one point. Like, I was so into it for 100 pages, and then I flipped to page 101 and I was like, whoa, what are we doing? Why are we getting so bogged down with this information? Let's move the plot forward. So a little love-hate with that, but I think overall the story was very fun to follow. It felt very wholesome. It was very much like good will conquer all if we work together, you know, we're trying to save the animal species. It was just very uplifting. I also did like how our protagonist Ayla was an introverted character and was a character who struggled with conversation and social settings. I feel like we don't get protagonists like that too much, so whenever I do come across one of those, I really, really love it because it's like I can relate just a little bit more. But also I do think even that was overdone just a little bit. Like, I understood a lot of the things she was going through and the things that were just like bouncing around in her mind, but I think there was like a little bit too much. Like, it went a little bit too far where I knew the things she was thinking in her mind, but we just kept getting the same things told to us through the text over and over and over and over again. Like, yes, I know her legs turn to jelly every time this happens. Yes, I do know she starts feeling weak in the knees. Like, it was just like certain things kept getting repeated. So overall, big picture for this book, I think it was a really good idea. I did enjoy reading it, but I think there were certain things that were just a little overdone in it. Also, I feel like this book was a little longer than it had to be. We could have condensed it a little bit, maybe with a few less random phoenix facts, but I would still recommend it if you're looking for a cozy read, if you're looking for a sapphic read, that was The Phoenix Keeper. Shall we talk about Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson? Yes, I did tackle this massive book at the end of December. I was just craving something like longer to read. I was reading some shorter books for Bookmas and I was like, I want to sink my claws into something long, thick, and juicy now. So Oathbringer was the one I picked up. As the third book in the Stormlight Archive, I expected great things, and especially after reading Words of Radiance, I expected really, really great things because Words of Radiance to me is the perfect fantasy book. Like, I could fault nothing in that one. It was genuinely so good. And so Oathbringer next to it fell a little bit short, I want to say, but also didn't fall short because I still ended up rating it a 5-star. This book was so long. It's definitely the longest book I've ever read in my entire life. It is longer than any of the other Stormlight books I've read so far, although I have heard that it continues to get longer as the series continues. But this was the first Stormlight book that actually felt long for me to read. Like, the Way of Kings to me flew by. Words of Radiance flew by. Yes, the word counts on those are also very high, but like they just passed so quickly. The first 800 pages of this book were slow. Very, very slow, a little bit of a slog to get through, and I was feeling disappointed. There was some very good character development happening within those first 800 pages, but it was happening very slowly. This is the first Stormlight book that I think could have been trimmed down. But all that to say, the ending of this book was the best ending of a Brandon Sanderson book I have ever read. Like, the last 200 pages of this book, insane, crazy, so good, best Sanderlanche ever. It was literally insane. I was having so much fun at the end of this book, and that's why I rated this book a 5-star in the end. Probably should have went with a 4.5 or a 4.75 just because I know like the beginning was not perfect, but the ending just made up for it. It gave me 5-star feelings. I think the character arcs that we went on in this book were so interesting. Each book in the series has given us like a different stage of our characters' development, of our like main characters going through the same like transition but in different ways. So the main theme in our character arcs in this one was basically like choosing the version of yourself that you want to be. Like, we really went back or forward, and like all of our characters in different ways realized that they had like little subsets of themselves, like various sides to themselves, different versions of themselves, and they had to choose like which version of myself do I want to be moving forward. And all of our characters went on different arcs in very creative ways, trying to navigate that. So all in all, still a very strong fantasy, definitely not as good as Words of Radiance throughout, but the ending of this book was incredible. I also feel like I do need to talk about the romance subplot because some of you have been asking me, since the romance subplot in Words of Radiance was like one of my favorites that I've read of all time. For me in this one, I was a little bit torn on it throughout the book while reading. I just think, how do I talk about this without spoiling things, but also making it clear enough so that if you have read this book, you know what I'm talking about? Let's see. With the theme of our characters choosing versions of ourselves, there was one specific character who was doing it very, very literally, like switching to different versions of herself in a very literal way, if you know what I mean. And I feel like the tie-in with the romance subplot being so affected by like choosing which version of yourself you want to be, I felt a little bit weird about that. I didn't love that side of the romance subplot, so didn't love how that was executed, but I will say, like, by the end of the book where we ended up with the romance subplot, I think made a lot of sense. I think I was very happy with. So there we have it. I hope that was clear to those of you who have read this book and have been wondering what I thought about all of that. We're gonna move into the 3 romance books that I read in December. So the first one was actually Just Friends by Pham. I was very excited when I received an art copy of this one. It's definitely a book I've been curious about ever since I saw it being announced, and I was definitely interested in reading it also just after seeing a lot of discourse on social media with some very dramatic reactions to this book. So if you have not heard of this one, we follow Blair, who has just graduated university and has all of her plans set in place at the beginning of the book. Like, she has an internship lined up, she's gonna move to, was it New York? It was some sort of a big city, but her great aunt gets sick and Blair decides to defer her job to move back home to help take care of her great aunt and just to like be with her. She decides, hey, I'm gonna be here for a long time, so she goes into town and tries to find a job. She steps into a coffee shop to apply to be a barista, and the manager of that coffee shop happens to be Declan, her childhood friend friend who could have been something more, but they have split ways since their younger years and have lost touch with each other. So we do have a second chance romance plot. First of all, the writing style in this book is definitely interesting. I would say it's a mix of Emily Henry, Catherine Center, and Kellyanne Bradley, which is kind of the wild card in here. But to explain that, this book feels more like a contemporary fiction with a romance subplot. So that's where we get our Emily Henry and Catherine Center inspiration. Where I get Kellyanne Bradley is that while reading The Ministry of Time, I noticed some of the writing felt a little awkward, a little clunky, and I saw some of that in this book. There were some word choices that felt a little bit out of place, but more towards the beginning of the book, I would say. I think like as the book went on, the writing smoothed out and improved immensely. So there were just a few little hiccups at the beginning of the book with the writing, but it did improve as you went on through the book. And it does feel a little bit more purple prose than what you normally get in a romance book, which I do actually enjoy, but there was a little bit of switching between like regular contemporary writing to like more purpley writing. And I feel like some of the switching back and forth maybe made the writing overall feel a little bit jilted, a little bit stiff. But overall, I did really enjoy the story. I thought it was sweet. I think Blair and Declan have just this like very sweet, tender, young love chemistry with each other, and I enjoy reading about that. Like an innocent love, it just was very, very tender, and I enjoyed their chemistry. I also appreciated how Haley tied some of her Vietnamese heritage into this story. I definitely felt the themes of growing up in an Asian household, and I'm not Vietnamese, I'm Chinese, but I think there definitely is some overlap in terms of like the values you grow up with in an Asian household, and I did love how she tied that into this one. Things like just like different cultural expectations on what a mother expects from her daughter, different pressures they put on you, also just like the growing up being so used to hiding your emotions, like pretending everything's okay, not actually speaking your true feelings. Like that resonated with me a lot throughout this book, so I enjoyed that. I also think the cozy small town setting was done really well in this. If you're a book lover who loves that like small town coffee shop bookstore vibe, I think you would love the atmosphere in this one. And I also appreciated how Blair as the protagonist was an overthinker. She was a flawed protagonist. Some might call her annoying, but some also might call her relatable. She is a character who is struggling with having no real direction at the beginning of the story. So it's just like, I don't know, the overall story is more subtle. It's not very flashy. And I actually appreciated that in this book. It was a different outlook, a different way of crafting together a romance story. I will say the third act conflict was not my favorite. I feel like the third act conflict revolved around a very convenient plot device that I don't love. It's a third act conflict that I've seen before in many other romance stories, and it's one that frustrates me every single time. So I didn't love the third act conflict, but I would still say give this book a try. It's definitely a different feeling type of a romance. And overall, I did enjoy this one. The next romance read was very seasonal. So Good Spirits by B.K. Borison. This was actually our Fable book club pick for the month. So I did read this alongside a lot of you guys over on Fable. If you haven't joined our Fable book club yet, please do. It is free. It's a lot of fun over there. But this is a holiday romance, of course. Our main male character is a ghost of Christmas past, and our protagonist, Harriet, is his assignment. So Nolan is basically assigned to Harriet to haunt her in the month or in the weeks leading up to Christmas and to try and find her like Scrooge characteristics, I guess, to fix before Christmas Day. However, as they start going back in time through memories and all of that, he starts to realize like there's nothing really wrong with her. Like she's not the typical like Scrooge-like character that he is assigned to haunt. So they need to figure out what is actually going on. I thought this one was overall a fun holiday romance. I do feel though that like I'm starting to realize I don't actually particularly enjoy holiday romances that much. I feel like every year I read at least one just to like, I don't know, I feel obligated to read one. I feel like I have to, but I'm also starting to realize that like these types of books are never actually my favorite. Like I've read this one, I've read Love Light Farms by B.K. Borison, which I actually enjoyed a little bit more than this one, but it was also just like an okay average read for me. I read The Christmas Tree Farm, which I didn't love, and I also read Wreck the Halls last year by Tessa Bailey, which I'm gonna be completely honest is probably like my least favorite book that I've ever read. So I'm just starting to realize that maybe Christmas romance novels are not the books for me. Like maybe I just need to read other wintry books, like wintry fiction books or wintry fantasy books over like wintry rom-coms. That being said, this was like a fine book for me. I had fun reading it. I think BK Borison is a master of banter. I also found there were some fun parts to this. Like we had this corporate paranormal office with like different types of paranormal species that act for different holidays. Like there were some Halloween ones that were like on break. I don't know. I love like a funny twist on a corporate environment. But I just found there were some things in the story that didn't make sense to me. Some like glaring continuity issues or just like logic holes. One of the main ones was that Nolan, our Ghost of Christmas Past, didn't seem to know anything about modern day anything, like modern day slang, modern day tradition, modern day technology, and that felt really weird because that was made to be this big like joke, this kind of inside joke throughout the story where he was this like ghost who lived a long time ago, so he was like old man type character. But there were just so many things, like he didn't know how a doorbell worked, he didn't know how like a lot of different things worked, and I was like, I know that this character has technically lived and died a long time ago, so wouldn't be familiar with technology, but it's not like he's been isolated from the modern day world. Like if he's been haunting people every single year since he became a ghost, shouldn't he have like witnessed a doorbell before? Just random things that I was like, how do you not know what that is after haunting hundreds of people over 100 years and stepping back through everyone's memories and seeing things happen? Like how do you have so little knowledge on the current world? So that was weird. And then there were just a lot of things about the conclusion that didn't make sense to me at all, which I don't know how much I can talk about it because like spoilers, but it just felt very much like an ending that it did not make sense to me. And I'm a fantasy reader, and I have to remember going into this is not a fantasy book. This is a romance book with some magical realism, but I don't know, to me, still, the magical realism needs to make sense. We need to have at least a little bit of an explanation as to like how things happen or what actually happened. And I feel like the ending of this left a lot to be desired and just like didn't make sense at all. Like it was just way too convenient what happened at the end. But yeah, all that to say, this was overall a fun, cute read. I felt that both the characters were these very lonely characters who just needed to like connect to someone, and they found that within each other, and I found that to be very sweet. That was good spirits for me, my holiday romance. Okay, and then our third romance for December was Great and Precious Things by Rebecca Yarros. Actually another pretty wintry romance, not like a holiday romance, but this one was set in a very wintry, snowy, cold environment up in the mountains. So I think it really made sense to read this one in the winter, but this is one of Rebecca Yarros's like military contemporary romances, which I've read a few of them. I think this is the fourth one I've read, and unfortunately I will have to say this was my least favorite. This was my first Rebecca Yarros book that I have not enjoyed. I was very surprised to find that I did not like the writing in this book, and I've liked like a lot of her books in the past, so I don't know what happened with this one. But for the plot of this one, we follow Camden. He went to war with his brother but came home alone, so his brother passed away in the war, and after that happened, Camden was like, I can't face my family anymore, I just feel so ashamed, I am never gonna go home. But 6 years passed, and now his father is suffering with Alzheimer's and has actually called Camden specifically back home to help take care of certain things. So Camden comes back, but when he returns, he also runs into Willow, who was actually Camden's brother's girlfriend, like the one that he lost in the war. This is his girlfriend, and Camden has always felt some sort of attachment to her. So very complicated feelings there. I don't know, I didn't enjoy this one very much. I don't know if it's just like I'm very sick of like brother-ish type romance love triangle stories anymore. Not that this one was a love triangle, because like brother's dead. Like there's no third point to the triangle, but just like, I don't know, the brother falling in love with the brother's love. I don't know if I like that. What I also didn't love about the romance in this was I didn't feel any of the tension, because this story is told through dual POV, which usually I enjoy, or like in the past I've enjoyed, but I think I've come to this realization that when a dual POV, especially in a very romance heavy book, is written in like basically a split 50-50, where you get an even amount of perspective from both sides and both sides are very open about their feelings, I just find that all the tension gets lost. lost, because when you know so clearly about what each individual in the romance feels for each other, there's just no more mystery to it. Like, you know everything so clearly as the reader, and like, I guess they're still kept in the dark a little bit, but as the reader, when you know too much, like when you know so much, that just erases like the fun of a romance to me, the mystery of it, the like, ooh, I wonder what she was thinking in this moment, or I wonder what he was thinking in this moment. I think that just like takes away from a lot of that experience. So I'm starting to realize I don't love dual POV romances when you get too much of both characters' minds. Like, I would rather just have one character's mind in full, or two characters' minds, but like they're both keeping stuff, even from the reader. I also think, like, just going back to the writing style, the writing was just like, it felt so on the nose. It felt like it was really pushing emotions on you, really spoon feeding them to you, not leaving you room to come to these conclusions on your own. It was just like, you will feel this way. This is how you're supposed to feel. And I think while reading a book, I just prefer like having the space as a reader to be able to make these decisions on my own as to like how I'm supposed to feel about certain moments. It was just very forceful with all of that, with all the emotions that you were supposed to feel. I also think there was just a lot of swearing in this book, which is like, that's fine. And I know like Rebecca Yarros does that a lot in her books, like especially in the Wuthering series, but I just think it was overused in this book to the point where like every time our male character felt a strong emotion and we wanted to convey that across to the reader, it was just done through swearing. And I feel like there's an art to it. There's an art to finding that balance, and like we should try and find more creative ways, different words to use to convey emotion over just uttering a swear word. I don't know, I feel like it was just very repetitive and overdone. And I do feel like this type of writing works better in like an angsty, gritty romantasy for me versus a contemporary romance setting. The plot in this one was honestly just a little bit boring to me. We had a lot of like town council politics. I couldn't really get invested in this story of like the town trying to like get money through like tourism or mining or whatever. Like, I don't know, I just like the way it was told, I couldn't get myself to care about it. And I think also like for our protagonist, a lot of his issues, his main issues, dealt with just the fact that he was a very misunderstood character, and a lot of the people in the town were accusing him of things that he didn't actually do, but he was the type of character to never actually speak up about it. Like throughout the entire story, like not until the end of the book, but like throughout most of the book, people would be like, oh, you did this, and in his head he'd be like, no, I didn't. But he wouldn't say that. Like, he never just out loud said, no, I didn't. Actually, that person did that. And like, I don't know, maybe I understand to a point where it's like, oh, like the whole town's against you. There's no hope in convincing them that you're not this terrible person. But I didn't even see him make an effort for the majority of the book. And maybe it was due to this like built up thing from the past, and like he didn't feel like it was worth it to speak up. I don't know. But whatever the reason, I thought that was very frustrating to read personally. And also there was this like kind of bizarre twist at the end that didn't make sense to me either. I just didn't really love this one, which was definitely disappointing because I have loved Rebecca Yarros's contemporary books in the past, like The Things We Leave Unfinished. I read that years and years and years ago, but like that book was incredible to me. Like, it was so good, so emotional. I just didn't feel things with this book. Okay, we're down to our bottom 3 books. This next one was unfortunately another disappointing read for me. So, A Sea of Unspoken Things by Adrienne Young. This makes me so sad because I love Adrienne Young as an author. Like, The Unmaking of June Farrow is one of my favorite books. That book is so well done, and I love Adrienne Young's like atmospheric, mysterious writing. I think it's just so beautiful and haunting, but this one didn't cut it for me. So this is a mystery with a little bit of a magical realism element. We follow James, who has a twin, Johnny, and Johnny has just passed away in a so-called hunting accident. But James has always been convinced that this was not an accident. There's something more that happened behind this. She just has that like instinctual gut twin feeling where it's like there's something else here that happened. It was not an accident. So she comes back to the small town where she grew up and also where the incident happened to try and just like sort Johnny's affairs and also try and investigate a little bit as to like what maybe could have actually happened. And as she's there, she reconnects with Micah, who was basically like her first love. So if you've read Spells for Forgetting, also by Adrienne Young, you will probably notice that the plot synopsis seems very similar, and you would be correct in that. The plot is very similar. I was feeling that even after reading the plot synopsis before reading this book, but I was just thinking, oh, you know, maybe we go in slightly a different direction. But I will have to say the similarities are similar. I think basically if you've read Spells for Forgetting, you've basically read this book. Like, yes, there are a few differences and maybe some of the twists, but a lot of the plot structure, the pacing of the book, the timing of events that happen, I think are so similar to Spells for Forgetting that, like, I would just recommend reading Spells for Forgetting because it was a better book than this one was, at least for me. I also just think that, like, this is a shorter read, but as we were going on through the story, we didn't get a lot of specific character development for any of the characters, I don't think, or not even development, but character building. I don't think any of the characters in this book had, like, any personality. The only thing that we knew about them, that they were just overprotective of Johnny throughout his entire life, and they always did things to, like, help cover up the mistakes he made or the things he did. Like, that's really all I got from our two main characters. And I also don't think Johnny himself was described very well. He maybe had the most character building, like, even though he was the deceased one in the story, but everything we learned about him was negative. It was always like, oh yeah, Johnny did this, that was kind of a bad thing to do, we had to cover up for him. He also did this, we had to cover up for him here. He honestly seemed like this terrible person, and that didn't help me feel attached to the story, because since Johnny was a terrible person, like, I didn't really care about his death, and so I wasn't invested in how it happened. I was just like, okay, well, he's dead, let's all move on. And so yeah, that was a little bit of a strange choice to paint him as this, like, very negative, very bad character. I also think the way the mystery was solved in this one was underwhelming, and this one also had a little bit of a weird twist that I don't think had a lot of evidence to back it up. And there were also a little plot holes in this one. Without, like, giving away too much, there was basically another character that had been missing for months, but no one had reported that character as missing for months. And for me, that just seemed really weird. Like, how can a young person go missing and no one reports it? I don't know. This one was a disappointment for me, especially disappointing because June Farrow was so thought out, like, well thought out. The characters were so strong in that one. I was very surprised at how much I didn't love this one. Very, very sad about it. Okay, so I read We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I was so curious about this one because there was a lot of buzz when this TV show came out a couple months ago. I never watched the TV show. I still haven't watched the TV show. Maybe I should now because I've read this book, but I was definitely very curious to read this book because I was just seeing so much of the TV show everywhere, like, months ago. But this one is actually another mystery fiction. We follow this very wealthy family with this really distinguished reputation in the story. They own a private island where they go to summer every summer, and we have 3 generations of this family. So we start with the grandfather, who was at the top of the chain. On the next level, we have these 3 sisters, and then they all each have their, like, sets of kids, their own families under that. And so we follow these 3 generations as they spend their summers on this private island. Our protagonist that we follow is a part of the youngest generation, so she's one of the kids, or, like, teenagers, and she's a part of this group of 4 main, like, teenagers that are around the same age that are really close with each other. So whenever they come back to this island, it's like the 4 of them. And they, of course, have a name for their groups, so they call themselves the Liars. However, one summer, this accident happens, and our protagonist is left with these injuries that she is still recovering from, and she's also left with some memory loss. She's actually not quite sure as to exactly what happened that summer, like what events led up to this, what the incident actually was, and how she got these injuries. So we go through the aftermath of that as she finally returns to this island, starts facing her family again, facing her fears, and starting to, like, remember things that happened. I did enjoy this book. I thought it was very eerie. The writing style was so interesting. It was very violent in the way things were written. There wasn't actually much violence in the plot of this book, but you wouldn't know from the writing style because the way emotions are described in this book were, like, almost gory, very violent. At the beginning of the book, our protagonist's father leaves and basically, like, you know, really hurts our protagonist in her heart. But instead of saying, like, oh, my heart broke, it was written as my father shot me in the heart. And that was the opening of the book. And I was immediately like, what? Like, what kind of book are we reading here? Are we getting into it? Like, is this really happening? And then I realized it was a metaphorical shooting in the heart. And that continued to happen throughout the book. So I found that to be really interesting. I really liked the writing style. And I just always love reading or watching content about like these really rich families who seem perfect on the outside, but once you look a little bit deeper in, you realize there are some sinister things happening behind the scenes. And that's what this book gave. So I was just so like immersed. I was just eating it up. I was devouring it. The book overall felt a little bit angsty teenager, which like I'm a little bit over reading at this stage in my life, but I think because the angsty teenager was mixed with this backdrop of this very wealthy, sinister family, I think it honestly worked better than like your average angsty teenager novel. So overall, I really enjoyed this one. There was also this massive twist at the end that I honestly did not see coming, and it honestly like got me a little emotional at the end there. So I would definitely recommend this. I honestly think it would be a good one to get you out of a reading slump because it is a quick read. It's not too long, but it's so addictive because it's one of those books you have to keep like flipping through. Like, I need to know what happened, especially with the whole story of like trying to recover your memories. You're starting to remember things, but they're a little fuzzy. You're trying to puzzle things together. I always find plots like that to be so intriguing. Like it's one of those stories that you can't look away from. So that was We Were Liars. And then the last book we are covering today, oh my goodness, the 16th book was actually Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë. This was our classic of the month. I was interested in reading this obviously because of the movie coming out soon. I also was just very interested in it because I read The Favorites by Lane Fargo in January of last year, and that is a retelling of Wuthering Heights. I really enjoyed The Favorites, so I thought, you know, I definitely should get into the source material, and this was a classic that didn't work for me. I feel like with classics, I go like very extreme emotions. I either like really love them, they're one of my favorite reads of all time, or I absolutely hate them. Unfortunately, did not love this one. I just think, is this blasphemous for me to say that I enjoyed The Favorites more than I enjoyed Wuthering Heights? I think with this idea of following toxic characters, I feel like there needs to be a reason as to why these characters are so toxic, and maybe I'm just not relating to like the time period. I just thought the characters in this were so whiny and so annoying to read about. I did not like any of them. The retelling version of these characters just made so much more sense to me in The Favorites because we were set in this very intense training environment where, you know, they were training for the Olympics. Skating is hardcore. And so because of all our characters like crumbling under this competitive, ambitious like environment, they were turning on each other, and that's where the toxicity came from. And with this, I just didn't understand it. And that's probably a me problem, but I had a tough time getting through this book. I actually really enjoyed the beginning of this book. I will say the start of the book, the setup, the writing I think was really good at the beginning. I really liked this bleak atmosphere that we were set into, but it was just, yeah, once we started meeting more of our characters and seeing the interactions with one another, the dialogue I think was really what irked me the most. I just couldn't get myself to care about these characters, really. And I always feel so strange when I don't love a classic, when it doesn't hit for me, but that's just the nature in reading. Some books will work for you, some books just won't. And unfortunately, Wuthering Heights was one that didn't work for me. Okay. Oh my gosh, those were 16 books. Those were the 16 books that I read in December. That was our monthly wrap up. So now that we've talked about all of them, let's get them up onto the shelves. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this wrap up. If you did, please leave me a like and a comment. If you don't know what to comment down below, let me know what you read in December. If you like me, subscribe, do that bell thing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!